Hi, I'm Cameron Cook. I have a bachelor's of science in cell biology. I work at Unity Museum, where we focus primarily on the last 200 years of history. So we can start with the life force. You could call it that. It was stored into galvanic cells, demonstrated at fairs, like with the famous Mary Shelley's visit, and then you have voltaic piles as well. 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the first electric fair. 5-10 million people went to this fair. One of whom was von Helmholtz. He was a early psi physicist that had done some theories on nerve conduction and actually visited the fair in the last year of his life. Couldn't stop talking about it in early stages of dementia. Now, William James, he utilized the life force as it was done with electrodes into brains, and he studied thresholds of nerve conduction and how much, he'd put a little bit in there and then actually was able to see that if you can make somebody sense something that they wouldn't normally if they were innervated. Now, back then, this is the old medical electricity kit, and traveling doctors would show up at a person's house. You can see it as these attachments, and they used it for everything. And general weakness would be used. First, you use one of these, and then have some ozone. So they'd show up at the comfort of somebody's home and be able to then administer. Diet and exercise like today wasn't really what they recommended. So that's all great. Scientists would always be studying the types of matter that one can observe. You have your matter, your material substance, you have your active matter, and then naturally there's the mind. The subject of psychology is, well, it's sort of like the bridge between the humanities and all that. The example of a prize fighter is utilized by Kafka, and the vitalist solution is simply put, there's material and spiritual substances. Don't really understand their relationship, but that's what psychology would study. Now, Gestalt psychology came along and said that yes, materialism is right, and someday we can prove it. However, you still have to have these other constructs such as order. There's an order to things, and that's a lot of properties come from that. It isn't enough to just know some elements, and then there's also significance. So the example is the color red. It isn't really particularly interesting to see, and have some physiologists describe the entire process. So, there's no significance to any studies of that. Now, early psychologists did treat insomnia and many other sleep issues. There was always some relationship known between the unconscious mind and our waking self, who this individual collected a lot of nightmares, actually. Different from night terrors, you are unable to awake from a terror, and you're often, well, there's a lot of crossover, but a nightmare is generally more imaginative, more complex. And to begin to study the sleep, polygraphs were used. They hooked them up. Think like a 6 here, 6 on the eyes, the forehead and the neck and chin and jaw. Really tough to analyze, but one can use the psychological understanding of, you have your waves, and they'd had thousands of feet of these from nightly studies, and they actually ended up putting them in cars and everything and on the factory floor to see what was really happening in people's minds. It turns out they'd fall asleep sometimes. But basically, you have REM sleep, and that corresponds with dreams. But that's the only significance, and then you also have some order. There's different phases. This individual, I think Webb, he was quite interested in phase 2 and 3, and said that there was some significance to that aside from just the obvious. But here we are today with some sleep disorders.
If you struggle with CPAP, you should check out Inspire. Inspire, sleep apnea innovation. Learn more and view important safety information at
Well, classic. Difficulties. So a sleep disorder, one can see is oh no. Do some maths here. Okay. It's something that people report. It's primarily a relationship issue. Roommates, hubby would come with them to the hospital and say that there's this problem. Less than 5 is pretty common, but over 5 is getting pretty loud and also very worrying. It starts to affect people more in their 40s to 65. They say it gets worse and worse. Luckily, there are some treatments for it, losing weight, and tracheostomy. The basic biology of it says that there's a lower and upper air pathways, that the lower will create a negative pressure, then atmospheric pressure is greater than that, and if there's not enough responsiveness, which is in the upper airway, it takes more effort, and people, if they don't want to breathe, then there isn't so much of that, so you have more struggling with overweight, and so you can just lose weight. That's a one solution. And then CPAP, and now Inspire actually is 95% effective. This is the one that sleep researchers are, it's their special disease or disorder. For 1 to 60 seconds there will be complete muscle tone loss, and then people generally will go and take a nap. It primarily affects 20s, 30s, children who have emotional difficulties. There's emotional theories of psychology that can help to explain it a little bit. You have your emotion, the activity resulting from it, and yeah, there's a strong aspect from like happiness or anger, and then yeah, so people will just have muscle loss, muscle tone loss. So what are we looking at here? Somebody comes in, they have personality issue, they will have obviously little self-image, irritable, wearying, fatigue. Oftentimes there's a sleep phase issue, so they're going to sleep late, waking up early. Um, when you get older, now this happens pretty fast. In 15 years, there's 15, 30, or your kid who has found some structure in their life and then some identity within that structure. And then about 30, you begin to realize that you're having a crisis and there's some better structure out there perhaps. If you have it figured out by the time you're 30, you're lucky. And that's when insomnia starts to develop when you're in like 45 or so. You start looking back the last 10 years of your life and looking forward at the next 10, and you know where did it all go, and suddenly you're an AARP and you're starting to try to take some responsibility for your life. Insomnia is a really tough one because it does affect you physically, even though oftentimes people will say that they can do it and it helps their self-image, I guess, and you develop endocrine issues. So here we are. This is what we're all about. What are some solutions? And trying to use some of these theories, such as this sort of quantity, order, and significance of it all. Well, that's something that psychologists will try to do, and to get these issues, sleep issues, under control for the patient. It isn't as simple as just telling them sleep more or take a nap, something like that. So you come into psychotherapy is one areas is of interest, that there's value systems and they're different for everybody. The psychotherapist will try to help them work through and maybe start thinking about their future more. You can see the dimensions of the future. You have your work, your career, you have your relationships, and you have your body to think about. And they're at the hospital. They're trying to look for something to do about this. Many people will be there because they can't sleep at night and they're tired all day, but they can't get to sleep, so they need some help doing that. So sometimes a little bit of a nap is a good idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work for people with obstructions. Narcoleptic people, it really helps. And insomniacs, they can't even do it because they were up late. But you have your non-addictive options. So we have our psychiatry options that include melatonin. Now there's natural metabolic cycles that accord with quantity. Then you have your order, which is what is actually going on, throughout the day. Many of these work on a 24-hour cycle. Melatonin's released at night. Magnesium, so they'll give you some gummies. I think they're over the counter. And schedule helps. They used to say have a glass of wine. And addictive options are including psychiatric options. Usually they'll give you 3 months prescription, and then once they get off of it, they have the exact same symptoms as before. Just cannot get to sleep. It's a huge problem as you start to get older, because the old idea was that you tell everybody diet and exercise, and that'll help your irritability, complaining, worrying, your fatigue. If you get out there and correct your diet, it has a lot to do with the time of day when one does these things. So when you're 15, 30, maybe whatever was working then doesn't work so well when you turn 30 and you have some major crisis. You're looking for a new structure, some new order of some kind, and then all of a sudden you're 45 saying, what happened with the last 10 years of my life? That was it. Then you're looking at the next 10 and you're in AARP and you can't be hitting the pavement anymore. So there's some real responsibility to take, and there's cultural differences. Many people prefer to listen to your it's a still from soothing relaxation. It's videos and some drifty music. There's correlation studies that were done with these PSG machines that were taken into people's homes. They really thought that this was going to take off, and sleep research after the 80s doesn't really get much interest anymore. So an idea to take away from this, here's your conclusion: is try to give people a psychological approach to diet and exercise. Positive psychology says that you arrive with everything you need. The vitalist description of reality is that you have your spirit, you have your body. The spirit is like a bird, and when you're asleep, then the cage is broken, and that's a sort of a Baha'i idea. Pisteshkin started positive psychology, and he was a member of the Baha'i faith, and his son is also a psychotherapist. They both use sort of folk theories that will challenge one's values system, and not only will help people to understand themselves and what they value in their lives, but they'll also try to help people by recognizing that there's these really ancient primal instincts that they call them, like your anxieties about the past and the future and the present. The recommended approach is ascetic, being a little more of that, ascetic with your choices. I guess that's counterintuitive. That's what Pisteshkin says. But I think that's just being more thoughtful of what people are actually going through in the day to day. It wouldn't be easy. It's a real social issue. So when you're 15, 20s, 30s, you're doing just fine. You found it. You're the best, and you're hot stuff. Then you get into your 30s, and that there's something out there, and that's when you start getting your sleeping too much in the middle of the day, and staying up late, and not eating right. So people show up and they want some help with making the right responsibilities. You get into your 45, because that's when you start thinking, what did I just do? Is that really really what I want to do, and you're looking at AARP, and it doesn't get easier to go to sleep, but luckily there's a lot of solutions out there, and I hope that you have a great day. Here are is that the there we go, references.